Well, in the next 3 weeks or thereabouts, Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari is expected to hand over the reins of government to a new administration. In like manner, many of the state governors will be doing the same thing, either because they have seen out of their constitutionally guaranteed 2 terms in office, or perhaps lost out during the last elections. For one, Governor Okowa of Delta State is due to retire. And as we continue to make a point of reviewing the performance scorecard of all public officers in the present dispensation, we're now being joined from Asaba, the Delta State capital, by Charles Aniagwu, the Delta State Commissioner for Information and Orientation. Good morning, Charles. Good to have you on the program.
Good morning. Good morning, Audrey, and it's also nice to see Steve and Leila.
Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Charles.
Good morning. Well, all right. Well, in reviewing Governor Okowa's scorecard, what are you most proud of? Well, my major concern is around how the governor has fared in terms of human capital development. Now, how many jobs was he able to provide for Deltans during his tenure?
Well, thank you very much. Starting from the first lap of your question, which is what am I proud of? I'm proud of a number of things. You recall in 2014, he started his campaign with what we call the SMART Agenda. And that SMART Agenda embodies policy priorities in the area of strategic wealth creation, meaningful peace building, relevant reforms in the agricultural and industrialization, as well as relevant reforms in the education and health sector, in addition to transforming the environment through urban renewal. And so looking at that scorecard, you are able to see what we call the marking scheme. So from that marking scheme, I can say that I'm proud of the amount of jobs we have created, in excess of directly over 22,000. And then, of course, the number of persons that have also been remotely been employed by the state government. Not to talk of those who have ad hoc jobs on account of the many projects we have executed in the area of construction of roads, in the area of building of new schools, in the area of revamping our hospitals, and of course the establishment of a number of technical schools. So we've seen a number of jobs also created in that line. But most importantly, we have also been able to bring about peace in the last 8 years. So when you hear of data, you hear of data for the better reasons and not for the wrong reasons as it used to be. We have become one of the most peaceful states in Nigeria on account of the interventions Okowa had brought to bear in the creeks, and a number of youths also being engaged, and the marriage with the traditional institutions. So we have enjoyed a whole lot of peace and harmony. So which means, looking at the marking scheme, our idea of fostering peace and harmony amongst the different ethnic groups in Delta is an area he has recorded a whole lot of success. And if you move forward to the issue of agriculture, we have also been able to make agriculture to move away from subsistence level. Now we have individuals who have become engaged in commercial agriculture. Even the youth who hitherto run away from agriculture on account of its primordial approach have now come to embrace agriculture, because we have brought in some form of improvement in terms of the tools you need to engage in agriculture, and also the empowerment that we have also carried out in that sector. Then the area of relevant reforms in education and health, we have also been able to improve our health sector. So even as we have also added a whole lot of value in the education sector, building a number of schools, secondary schools and primary schools, and most importantly, establishing 3 new universities at the same time. And all of them are up and running, to the extent that when we had strike across the length and breadth of the country, all the higher institutions in Delta were in session, and the students were taking their courses, as well as the lecturers being available to deliver those lectures. Then, of course, lastly, we have also been able to transform a number of our urban areas. So, speaking specifically, I am proud of these many milestones, and I know that history will judge the administration, and particularly the driver of the administration, Senator Dr. Okowa, very, very fairly. And then, if you also
all right, Charles,
as to how many jobs we have created, I mentioned it at the beginning that a lot of jobs have been created in the course of these 8 years. Yes, I can hear.
All right, Charles, please just hold your thoughts. We will return to all these things that you're talking about, but we have to go on a short break. And when we return, of course, we'll come back to the Delta State Commissioner for Information. Don't go away. Please stay with us. You're welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. And we're still on with the Delta State Commissioner for Information, Charles Aniagwu. Good to have you back, Charles. But let me...
Thank you very much, Steve.
All right, you're welcome. Let me straighten it a bit. I know that you've reeled out a number of figures and statistics to show how Governor Okowa has performed well. You mentioned the areas of job creation, health, etc. But I'd like you to be specific. How has that helped in lifting Delta State from the states that is not something that you can be proud of in terms of your exposure, indebtedness, and in terms of the rate of the unemployment and the underemployed? I'll give you the figures that I have here. More than 272 billion naira being owed, and that includes about 27 billion in pension arrears. That's what Delta State, is owing at the moment. That's what Governor Okowa will live with. And in terms of unemployment, it's about 40.36%. And if you add that to 20.1% of the underemployed in Delta State, I'm not so sure how the number of little jobs here and there that you claim that you have created can change this figure, which a lot of people will say is very high. How will you react to that?
Now, let me tell you that those figures you have there are very, very incorrect, and I'll prove it to you that they are very, very incorrect. Let me start from the issue of debt. When you talk about the over 270 debt level you are talking about, you forget that larger part of that debt is contractual. We have been able to award a number of projects that are. The moment you sign off a project at the level of the ESCO, if the project is 4 billion, it is assumed that you already have a liability because you have to pay the contractor as he continues to provide a certificate of completion of a certain stage of such project. So once you have awarded a whole number of projects, you are likely going to have a huge debt at that level. These are not debts that you can say you borrowed money and then they have just accumulated and they are waiting for nothing. So if you even cancel those projects and say you are not going to do them anymore, it will look as if your debt level has come down. But the fact is that you must continue to award contracts, you must continue to execute projects. We came in with a desire to indeed revolutionize urbanization in our state. And today, a number of urban centers have, of course, received a very new boost in terms of what we have been able to do, building projects and enhancing the livability of these urban centers. And if you talk about pension, that is what we did in the last administration. Though there were mistakes in it, but it was something that was what we're doing, which is migration from the old pension scheme to the contributory pension scheme, which is much more digital in approach. And in doing so, the only area that you could call mistake is that they migrated everybody, even up to those who have worked for as much as 25 years in the service, into the new pension scheme rather than allowing them to exist with the old pension scheme. The new pension scheme is far better for the worker because it gives you more than 70% of what you are getting in the old pension scheme. And because of that accumulation, which we'll call a payment for past services, you now have huge sums of money that accumulated that the state needed to defray. And in the course of time, we have brought it down from even close to 80 billion to the numbers that you mentioned a while ago. And we are still on monthly basis spending quite some amount of money, over 1 billion naira in servicing a pension from 3 flanks. One, payment for past services. Second, payment for the old pension scheme. And then thirdly, state contribution to the digital and of course the contributory pension scheme. We do hope that in the course of time, those states that don't want to migrate because they are scared, we realize that they are only just pushing the evil deed forward. And so we are happy that we have been able to migrate, and gradually we are defraying the expenses that are accrued on account of that migration. On the issue of other debts we are talking about, the federal government is owing us several billions of naira, and in one of the tranches, the federal government is to give us over 240 billion. And we thought that since the federal government said it will not be able to pay at once, that it was important for us to be able to take advantage of this debt that was being owed the Delta State government on account of shortfalls in remittance due to the 13% derivation from oil. Of course, don't forget that we have become number 1 in oil production on account of also the peace we have brought to bear in our state. And so we reason that the naira has become quite unstable, and that allowing the federal government to begin to pay in tranches of just 4.5 billion every month may not give us the necessary value for that money. And since we have a whole lot of projects that we needed to finance, we now proceeded to take a discount loan of 100 billion. Even if at the end of the day we got just about 92 or 91 billion of that amount. But these are the debts that individuals are mentioning. If the federal government decides to give us all our money at once, you will discover that we will almost be moving in the positive direction. So we are not worried about that. Now, coming to the issue of the unemployment. Individuals who came to Delta to collect data did not decide to visit one or two areas without even looking at what is happening in our rural communities. What we have done is not to restrict employment to what used to happen in the cities where you just come and, as a government, you will just say that the state government is employing 5,000 persons. And then you bring in 5,000 into the state civil service, knowing that the state civil service largely will have the workers concentrate in the city center, particularly the state capital. And once you come there, you will calculate that many persons have gotten jobs. That's not what we did in Delta. We came up with an approach of creating entrepreneurs who live in different communities. In some of our programs, we said for every ward, we must take 3 persons in each of the programs. And we have multiple platforms to engaging our people. We have what we call RISER, which is Rural Youth Skill Acquisition Program. We have what we call GEST, which is Girl Entrepreneurship Training, Skill Training Program. We have also what we call WESA, which is meant for the women. We also have what we call YAGE, STEP. All these different programs are targeted at different levels and different demography in our state. So if you want to come and have the right data of the amount of jobs were created in Delta, go to all the local governments, go to the wards and see what we have done, because we didn't want a situation where you continue to encourage a rural-urban drift. Today, a number of our persons have even left the urban centers to proceed to even the creeks, because we have made the creeks much more livable, and we have also been able to make the creeks place that people can afford to have jobs to do, set up their own skill centers, and then provide services that they are needed in those areas. And so it is not true that you have that level of unemployment in Delta. I'm not just speaking because I'm in government. I will encourage you to come and see the amount of persons that were lifted out of poverty and out of unemployment in Delta on account of our multifaceted approach at creating jobs and building entrepreneurs. And these entrepreneurs in their own right, Steve, have also created multiple levels and of employment remotely for a number of persons that they have trained, sometimes free, because they believe that government give to them free and they needed to give back to the society.
Mr. Aniagwu, you said that this government has sought to bear peace in the states, but in terms of security, there have been several reported cases of killings, kidnappings, and general crises within the state under the Okowa administration. Why has it been hard for this administration to tackle the problem of insecurity effectively?
Well, Leila, let me tell you that what I have also told your colleagues in time past, that you don't go into a rotten teeth and begin to look for into a rotten mouth and begin to search for a healthy teeth. Nigeria today is seriously challenged. And when you look at it on the average, Delta is doing far, far better than a number of states in the country. Because there are certain levels of security that you require the federal government to be much more forthcoming and demonstrate a whole lot of political will. There are certain things you cannot afford to do. For instance, the issue of attack by headers. Even if you want to empower your local security vigilante, by the laws we operate in this country, there is a particular kind of ammunition that you can provide for them. When you compare that with individuals who are coming with AK-47 and even higher categories of ammunition to visit communities with this insecurity, you will discover that that challenge is something that is far beyond the state. But if we have been able to empower the police command in Delta, and we must thank the former commissioner of police in Delta, Ari, who has done so well in helping as much as possible to comb a whole lot of the local government. Of course, not also forgetting the intervention of the DSS, the military in the state, and other security agencies, specifically the civil defense. They have done so well with that kind of collaboration. We have in Delta been able to ensure that what happened in other states and the federal government is not what is going to happen, which we call inter-agency rivalry. In Delta, we have been able to build some form of harmony where they cooperate. The DSS and other sister agencies provide the enabling environment in terms of intelligence that makes it possible for both the military and, of course, the the police to be able to swoop on those who may want to commit crimes and criminalities. Yes, it is true that once in a while you have such pockets. So in which case we cannot say it has been eliminated 100%. But when you place it side by side with all the other 35 states and the Federal Capital Territory, you will notice that Delta has become heaven of some sort. And that is why a number of our cities are growing very, very fast. Today, Asaba, the capital of Delta State, is rated as the fastest growing capital in the entire federation. And because we have been able to provide that enabling environment, you need to see what is happening in terms of the economy if you visit the state capital. In Warri, which is our commercial nerve center, we are tackling a whole lot of infrastructure challenge, particularly controlling flood, so that at the end of the day, by the time we progress to dealing with a number of other infrastructure, particularly road construction, you would have seen that Warri also opened up and looks as beautiful as what we have in Asaba today. Once, if you are somebody who is used to Asaba, perhaps in the past 6 years, and then you come in now, you will notice that there is a very sharp difference. Investors are coming in, individuals are coming here to live even while they do some work in the southeast, because this place has been provided a whole lot of enabling environment for people to thrive. So, Leila, my sister, I will urge you, for all expense paid, to come into Delta. I will bet that you prefer to tell Arise that you want to be interviewing people from Asaba, because the peace you have here is far more than what exists in Lagos.
All right.
In this place, you are not going to have traffic harassing you, and I can bet you that even Steve, my brother, will also want to return home to enjoy the very atmosphere that exists here in Delta.
All right, you've touched on infrastructure in Asaba, Warri. I'd love for you to touch on, the developmental strides that you have made in the creeks. Recently, I was tagged in a viral video showing a woman with a baby tied to her back crossing a dilapidated bridge in the most dangerous manner. I'm sure you must have seen that video. I'd like for you to tell our viewers, I don't know if you have seen that video.
I've seen it, but I can tell you that
tell us if that was in Delta State or not. And I would like to know what you guys have done in the creeks in particular. And also you touched on flooding in your state. I would like for you to shed more light, because recently there was a story of a 10-year-old boy who was swept away in the rain just last month. 7 persons were killed during the rainstorm. Now, what were the challenges that prevented Governor Okowa's administration from carrying out better flood control measures that could have avoided such a tragedy?
Well, now let me start from the 6 persons that died on account of the rainstorm. That was a natural disaster. The rainstorm came quite heavy and quite intensive, and then it fell a tree. And then that particular that was operated by that storm fell on top of a building. You have individuals who were living in that building. That, to the best of my knowledge, is not something anybody could have prevented, because we were not in charge of the intensity of the storm. But may their soul rest in perfect peace, and wish the family God to grant them the fortitude to bear the demise of their loved ones. Now, for the young boy, he was returning from a church in the evening, and unfortunately, the rain had fell, and the flood, which was passing through a drain that was being constructed as part of our ongoing effort at controlling flood in a number of urban centers, his slippers fell, and a young boy of I think 10 or 10, who just wanted to pick up the slippers, but unfortunately he was swept up by the flood. We want to again sympathize with the family. It was just an unfortunate incident, quite preventable if there was an adult that was possibly guiding that child at that time of the day, but that's not what we need to begin to look at. But what happened was that it was flood water that was flowing through a channel that was being constructed by the government. And there's so much of such channels, some of them, majority of them have been completed in Asaba. We have built storm drainages that worth billions of naira, to the extent that once you come in now, people are no longer scared of their houses being submerged, which was the case in the past. We did a study that enabled us to be able to construct such storm drainages. And then you asked about the creeks. I am happy and I must appreciate you, Audrey, and of course a number of other persons in your your medium, for what you did in terms of highlighting our Oge floating market, the only floating market in the entire West Africa, which was built in a place called Oge Dimigun in the heart of the ocean. It's just almost at a confluence between Edo, Delta and Ondo. You had at the point of construction, we saw a whole lot of foreign currencies to show that some form of a foreign trade actually had taken place in such places. If you go to a place like Okrenkoko, We have now paved roads where people now proceed to their communities and they can drive within their communities. In the whole of Burutu town, we have all the roads paved, and in addition to these roads, we're also building schools, modern schools in those areas, getting their hospitals function such as the ones in the city, so they don't need to travel to worry to be able to have access to healthcare. And then, of course, I can tell you that in a place like Ugulaha, we even have a road that spans as much as 19.7 kilometers within the creeks, one straight road. And so our people in the creeks did not forget about the pipeline because there was nothing inside the pipeline anymore. But they left the pipeline because they have seen that those promises they were made in time past have now left the pipeline and is now on the ground. You recall in time past, when they talk about projects, they want to talk about school, somebody will tell them it's on the pipeline. And to a very large extent, they proceeded to see whether they could have access to the pipeline and bring out those projects, which accounted for the number of busting of pipes that you used to read about in Delta. You want to ask, OG, how did we become number one in oil production in Nigeria? At the time we came in, we have receded back to our number 4 position. But 2 years, 3 years down the line, we brought the peace, and we brought the peace by also taking development to the creeks. And as such, we have remained number 1 in oil production in Nigeria for more than 3 years. It didn't happen by magic. It's not because there were new oil wells that were discovered. It is because now oil exploration and exploitation is going on peacefully in Delta. And beyond that, we have built bridges, so many bridges, linking up our rural communities and of course the coastal communities. And so, there are persons in the creeks today. I recall one man telling me that the Okowa is the Jaw governor that he has been looking for. What does that tell you? That he was looking for his brother from a Jaw ethnic nationality to become a governor because believing that his brother will be the one that will understand the plight of the people who live in the creeks. Because the creeks in Delta is majorly inhabited by the Jaws. Of course, you also have the Shekiris, some pockets of the Robos, and then some of other brothers from the other ethnic nationalities like the Isokus and a few from the Anioma ethnic extraction. But Okowa came and walked the talk by taking development to the creeks. So today, the peace you hear about in Delta didn't happen by chance. It happened because there was a concerted effort by a man who believed that his people needed the best. And he gave them what God had been able to give to him in terms of understanding the needs of his people. And what makes us happy today is that the man who is coming to take after him, Borowori, is not a learner in the whole process. He has been part of the government. He has been in charge of the House of Assembly, approving all these projects. He's a man who has a great grasp of what you call the youth and of course members of the society grassroots. And so with that knowledge, we are confident that the development will not only be sustained, but will be advanced in such a way that you'll be proud to call Delta your home, my dear sister OG.
All right, Charles, before we let you go, quickly, can you clarify for us the situation of things regarding the controversy around the new pension law that the governor was said to have signed? Did he sign a new law? If he didn't, the old law, what is he entitled to? What will he be going home with? And then a corollary to that is that, yes, Sheriff Oborewore is now the governor-elect. But people are saying that now that Okowa can go to Abuja, well, we do not know what the courts will say, as the vice president, will Sheriff's term serve as Okowa's third term? How much of freedom will he be given to govern Delta?
Well, let me start from the last question. First of all, you know that once a man is sworn in as a governor, he becomes the leader. No matter how much power you have from outside, you will realize that he is the one in charge. And the person of Okowa is not one who will want to get involved in some form of interloping or become meddlesome in the activities of the state. He will quite all right based on the knowledge he has about the state and the relationship he has with those who are coming in to be able to provide necessary and needed advice when the need arises. And of course, you cannot rule out such person that rule out such advice because it's well needed across the length and breadth of the country, which is why a number of times you see our former president Goodluck Jonathan visit the villa, even if he was defeated by Buhari. That visit is not for them to drink Coke and Fanta. A number of times he also offered advice to Muhammadu Buhari. That never in any way made it a third term for Goodluck Ebele Jonathan. So those who are talking about a third term are just looking for stories to tell. And in a democratic setting, stories are allowed to be told. But what is most important is that those who have been told the stories have. And so, Oborowori is a man who has piloted the affairs of the House of Assembly with a whole lot of intelligence, to the extent that today is a lawmaker in Delta State. So he is a man of his words who is capable of governing Delta State even without interference of any other person. But in doing so, of course, he's going to work with a sound mind to be able to understand a number of issues and to be able to deal with those issues and advance the development in Delta. So Okowa is not going to run a third term. He's not seeking a third term in Delta. For now, while we are still waiting for the outcome of the court judgment with respect to the presidential election, Okowa is not an idle man. By the time he leaves office, there are a whole lot of things that he can do. He's a medical doctor by training. He has also a whole lot of knowledge that he can also provide a whole lot of consultancy services for a number of persons. So he's not going to be idle to begin to look for what to do in the government house, except when invited to offer necessary and needed advice. Now again, you asked earlier as to the issue of that I should clarify a law that was signed under the administration of Honorable James Ibori. That law was signed. The only amendment we had in the first tenure was to include the acting governor, so that at the end of the day, he is not also left out, having had the opportunity to govern the state. And so that is what it is. I don't have details as it is now as to what individual is entitled to. We have had a little debate around it, and that debate is still ongoing as to what we will do with that law. But as to whether Okowa put in a new package for himself, that didn't happen. Those who are looking for certain straw to hold, because when a man is putting on white, like I'm putting on now, and you feel that the man is shining too much, to be able to put a little stain so that you take away the amount of person that are admiring the dress, you just go and look for a little more now, because the moment you throw it, it stays. That is what some persons are looking at. But we can assure them by the grace of God that Okowa will leave the government house on the 29th of May this month with his head very high. Because if you look at the marking scheme, like I said earlier, which is the smart agenda, he has scored something in the region of A. And the last time I checked, when somebody said to have scored A, he's progressing in the region of 80. If 50 can be a credit score that could grant you admission into a university, it means that the man who scored an A is proceeding to becoming a PhD holder in that field. And I will want you to come and be the one to grade him, taking into cognizance the marking scheme, which embodied the policy priorities that he spelled out while he was coming into office. He did not say that he's going to marry wife for every day and when he becomes a governor. Perhaps if you score him on that, you may want to say he has failed. But if you take a look at the things he said he's going to do, he has delivered. But even in the ones he said he's not going to do, Deltas has become empowered to the extent that those who ordinarily wouldn't have gotten married have gotten married because they have gotten to the age of getting married. So even when you look at that too, you will not also feel woefully in terms of looking at the issue of marrying wives and husbands for people. So my brother Steve, my dear sister Audrey and Delilah, I can tell you that by the grace of God, we are happy that history will be very, very kind and fair to Governor Okowa.
Well, thank you for joining us on the morning show today, Mr. Charles Aniagwu, Commissioner for Information in Delta State. We are going to have to leave things there.